How is everyone doing this morning? Happy Easter. I know we got a lot of people in the lobby. We see you. We love you. Can we make some noise in here and thank the people in the lobby? Come on. I even heard we got people next door in the overflow. Those are the real MVPs, so we celebrate you. It's a great day to be in church. I love Easter. I mean, it's literally what my life is built around, the resurrection of Jesus. But before we get to the resurrection, we have to start with the cross. I want to make sure we all know why we're here today. Some of you are like, I don't know why I'm here. Someone said, God might come. And so why we're here today is because just a few days before what we're celebrating today, Jesus went to the cross. Jesus gave his life on the cross, and he shed his blood for humanity because there was a separation between God and humanity that was caused by this thing called sin. And whether you know what I'm talking about or not, you felt sin. You felt it. It's in our world. It's in our interactions. It's in the decay of our world. We feel it. And when Jesus went to the cross and shed his blood for humanity, he offered himself on our behalf. And then he was taken down from the cross lifeless, and he was placed in a tomb. And they rolled a giant stone over the tomb to make sure that no one could get in. But then just a few days later, the stone was rolled away, and Jesus was no longer in the tomb. Now, we know, if you've been in church for a while, you know that the reason he's not in the tomb is because he is risen, that he is no longer dead, he is alive. But there's an interesting interaction that happens in John 20 where we see that first moment of them coming to the tomb and the confusion that is in this moment. We see this here, and I'm going to talk about three truths of the resurrection this morning and what it means for us in our life. And I know you got lunch plans, so I promise I won't be too long. But there's this interaction in John 20. We'll start in verse 1, where it says, "Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early, while it was still dark, and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, 'They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him.'" You see the confusion here. She recognizes that the tomb is empty, but she thinks that someone has taken him. She thinks he's just missing. And the three truths we're going to focus on about this empty tomb, the reality of the empty tomb, there's these three truths. The first one is he's alive. The second one is he is speaking. And the third one is he's changing lives. Because that tomb is empty, those three truths we believe at our core. The first one, he's alive. I think it's interesting that Mary Magdalene is chosen to be this vessel to communicate that he's not there. One, because if you know anything about Scripture and her story, before she met Jesus, she had a very dark past. Her life was radically changed by Jesus. And now she stands at the tomb confused on where he is, and eventually we'll get to this at the end of the story. She becomes the messenger to share the message of where Jesus is and share the truth that he is not dead, he is risen. Why is this important? I find this really important because the context of this time, a woman was not somebody that you would normally choose to spread a lie. That if the disciples or something, they were going to come up with a plan to start a lie, they probably wouldn't have chose a woman. Why? Because in the context of this day, a man's voice carried more weight. That women weren't seen as the same that they are today. That if he was going to choose a voice to spread a lie about the resurrection, he probably would have chosen one of the disciples or a respectable man who carried weight in the community. But he chooses Mary, which I love. He chooses this voice to be the one that spreads this. Now, when it comes to the empty tomb, there can be pain there. You see this with Mary. She goes there and she's confused in these first two verses. Where is he? Anybody ever felt like that? Where's Jesus? Sometimes we can have some confusion in our life and we question where he is. And in this moment, she's saying, where is he? I'm at the tomb, he's not here. And then John 20, starting in verse 11, after the disciples had come and seen, they expected the empty tomb, this is what's said. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she stood to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they have laid him." You still see some confusion. Now she's seeing angels in the tomb, but she still is sensing, I don't know where he is. It's interesting when it comes to the tomb, the empty tomb, even in our lives today, can either cause panic or joy. It depends on what you believe the truth is about that empty tomb. If it will cause panic if you think it's just an empty tomb, but it can cause joy for your life if you believe that the reason it's empty is because Jesus has conquered sin and death. And that's when it causes joy in our life. And if the tomb is empty, that changes everything for us. I want to say this. The resurrection of Jesus is not just an event to be remembered. It's not just an event that we come here to remember and kind of golf clap for. The resurrection of Jesus is an event that is interactive. It's a reality that is meant to be experienced. We walk in the truth of the resurrection every day. It's not just something we come to remember, it's something we live. And if we know that Jesus has walked out of that tomb, we don't have to panic, we don't have to worry. We can have joy because he is risen. That's the truth. That we can have joy because Jesus is risen. And if the tomb is empty, the reason we can do this is because sin has been defeated. That's good. It means death has lost its sting. That if the tomb is empty and Jesus has conquered death, that means he offers all of that to anyone who calls on his name. That one day when we perish from this world, we will not taste the sting of death. We will spend eternity with him in heaven. The third thing is that hope has a name. That we have hope because of Jesus. If the tomb is empty, even in a world that feels hopeless, we can find hope in the one called Jesus. And the last thing, if the tomb is empty, what this means is it means that we now have joy as our inheritance. Here, I want to hear you. Maybe it's your first time in church today. I want you to hear me say this. The Christ life is a joyful life. The life with Jesus is a life filled with joy. I know some of us have to change our face to show that sometimes, but it's true that we have joy because of the resurrection of Jesus. Now, I know what some of you are saying. But what if it's not? What if it's not true? Well, if it's not true, I would read 1 Corinthians 15:14 that says this, that if Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain and our faith is in vain. That if Jesus hasn't risen from the grave, then everything I'm doing here doesn't matter. But I'm boldly standing before you this morning proclaiming that I believe that Jesus has conquered the grave. So I don't stand here in vain. I stand on that truth this morning. So the first truth of the gospel is he's risen. The second truth is he is speaking. John 20 continues in verse 14 as Mary is interacting. Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know who that was. Jesus said to the woman, "Why are you weeping? Who are you seeking?" Supposing him to be the gardener. This is funny. You're standing before Jesus. He's talking to you, and she says, "I think this is the gardener of the tomb." Yeah, that's his role here. This is what she supposed. I get it. It's hilarious. She said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Do you see this change here? She's confused. She thinks he's the gardener. But the moment Jesus says her name, everything changes. See, this is the reality of the resurrection, that Jesus is speaking. After the disciples leave, she's standing there and she's weeping, but then the moment Jesus speaks into her story, everything changes. See, a lot of us in this place this morning, we might have some misconceptions of who Jesus is. We might be distant from him. We might struggle with acknowledging the truth of him. And I'm just happy you're here, because I believe the reality is you just haven't heard him say your name yet. And there's power when Jesus speaks into our story. This moment is deeply personal between Jesus and Mary. Jesus doesn't just say, he doesn't call her by her title. He doesn't call her by what she's done, doesn't call her by her past. Jesus calls her by name, calls her by name, and it changes everything. This is when she recognizes him. Jesus didn't just rise from the dead for the world as a whole. Jesus rose from the dead for you. It's easy for us to think that this thing that we're celebrating today, the resurrection, is just meant for everyone else in the world and has nothing to do with me. No, the resurrection of Jesus was for you personally. His resurrection is not just some event that we're here to celebrate. It's an invitation to be personally transformed by him. The resurrection, there's joy in this. It becomes real for us the moment we hear Jesus speak into our story. Here's the reality. Jesus is speaking today. He's tugging at your hearts. He's revealed himself to you over and over again, and maybe you've been resistant. Jesus is speaking. It's not that Jesus is speaking. The question we have to ask ourselves, am I listening? Jesus is speaking. I love this, the kid in the front just said, I'm listening. Well done, parents. We are not questioning this morning that if Jesus is alive, is he still moving or is he still speaking today? We know he is speaking. The thing that we have to get right is we need to turn our listening ears on and respond to what he's saying. He is speaking. The last one is this. He's changing lives. He's changing lives. He's been changing lives the whole time. From the moment of the resurrection, people's lives have been being transformed by the truth of Jesus. He's alive, he's speaking, and he's changing lives. After Jesus speaks to Mary, calls her name, and her whole world changes in that moment when she realizes the resurrection, that Jesus really is alive. Everything changes, and her purpose changes. Her purpose for life changes. She leaves that place and becomes the first witness. She shares the story of where Jesus is, that he's not in the tomb. And she no longer shares the story with I don't know where he is. She shares the story that he is risen. He's not in the tomb because he's no longer dead. Jesus is alive, and we have reason for joy because of that, amen? She goes from grief to witness, because here's the truth. The resurrection changes us. If we step into the truth of the Easter message, the resurrection of Jesus, it transforms us. It changes us. It changes not just our day, it changes our week. It changes our focus in life. I thought for sure I was gonna play in the NFL. Nobody else seemed to get the memo. But I did. I thought that was my plan. And then I met Jesus and everything changed. See, when we encounter Jesus and we lean into the resurrection and the truth of the resurrection, and we join him in his life, it changes us. And some of us have been resistant to change. And I want to challenge you with this question. How's that going for you? The reason I can talk boldly about the joy of the resurrection is because I believe without a shadow of a doubt it's true. And I believe Jesus is alive and working today. He's still speaking. He's still transforming lives. He's still changing people's eternities and their purpose in life. And I have a little bit of something I want to show you here There's an amazing family that calls Grace home, whose purpose in life has been changed by the truth of the resurrection. And so why don't you check this video out?
Stefan and I met in South Africa. We immigrated to the United States in 2013, and in 2014 we had our first and only child, John Daniel. Last year, JD started asking me questions about faith I couldn't answer.
So we decided to let's go to church, just go take a look. And through just listening to what was being said, I could, for the first time ever, relate to something.
We kept going back. Sundays became our favorite day. I just had this desire for more. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to feel that more. And I felt a close relationship with God, but I hadn't yet encountered Jesus, and I didn't know how. The Christmas Eve service was about grace and truth, and Pastor Dan explaining how grace is a gift that's not earned, and Pastor Shane saying there's only salvation through Jesus. That moment of realization that I'm carrying this weight of wrong choices and sin, I was carrying it and not feeling worthy of being forgiven. And just to realize that I could offload that and give that to Jesus, that moment, it all made sense. Pastor Shane, he had everyone close their eyes, and whoever was ready to just raise their hands. And I raised my hand, and I felt Steph raise his hand, which
I felt like there was a wind that blew over the whole world, and I felt it.
We hadn't spoken about this. I didn't know this was going to happen. It was amazing. Right there and then, I was saved. It was the most emotional night of my life, really.
Someone that had no interest to suddenly saying, I need to do this in my life. And the fact that my wife and my son were at the exact same point, at the exact same time, it's a beautiful story and a beautiful chapter, and something that, for me, I can only describe as light in my life and light in my family's life.
Ever since then, nothing has been the same. It really was a defining moment of a new me. My eyes have been opened. God works in mysterious and wonderful ways, but it's right in front of us if we're just willing to see it, and I'm aware of that now. Jesus has changed my life, our life as a family. I know that nothing will ever be the same, and you can't explain it, but it's happened to me.